Hi students, Mr. Epperson here. I'm going to give you a brief tutorial on how to use Google Spreadsheets. Now, a spreadsheet always sounds kind of weird or something like maybe just accountants use it or something, but it's really just another type of document. If you're familiar with using Word docs and Google Docs, and this is basically just as important, if not more important, than typing in a document. We tend not to use them because just intuitively they look weird. The format for a spreadsheet is, instead of one big window that would have, like a paper like you'd write on that you're more familiar with, it's cells is actually the term for them. You can see I'm clicking on them right now. You can change almost anything you want about a cell, from its color to the font of the text that's in there, to whether it's text or numbers or symbols or all kinds of things that you want to put in there. And the function of those cells is actually usually to do math. So I can do something like 3 and 3 and want to get an answer about 3 plus 3, and I can hit equals and say this cell plus this cell, and then hit enter, and it should give me 6. So there's a basic function that you can do in Sheets. You can also change the plus to a multiplier, which is a star, and get 9. There's some real basic functionality there. It's a calculator, but it also does a wild array of different functions. And in fact, one of my favorite things to do is type in a name of a function like sum, and then all it asks you to do is to click and drag, a bunch of data, and you hit enter, and all of a sudden it's just basically added all those numbers together without you having to go +1, +2, all these different ones together. So spreadsheets are fun because it makes math look really easy, but you have to know how to use math in order to know how to use the spreadsheet. So that's kind of a fun incentive to, want to be more of a student of math and understand how to use those math equations and skills, because then you can apply those skills to something like this. What we're going to do today, instead of applying calculation skills, we're going to let the spreadsheet actually graph for us, draw a graph, and save us the difficulty of drawing, especially during distance learning, a graph on paper. I think graphs on papers, a graph on a piece of paper is always a great idea because it helps you really understand how it was made. But in lieu of being able to do that in class with you guys, this will be a stand-in. So what we're going to do here is open up the document Changing States Lab, Graphing Your Data. And it says just to follow the directions. So if we make it to 13, we'll be done. So every time I do a new step, after you watch me do it, go ahead and pause the video, and then you'll be able to try that on your own with your own data and in your own graph. So the first step is to open the sheet document. So if I open it up, I get a document that looks just like this. You're going to enter your data into that came from your lab. So let's go ahead and go back to the lab and find your data. Of course, you're going to have data in here. I've actually just gone ahead and already entered it. So I'm going to do that. I didn't show it here, but this step is actually really easy. If you copy the lab table that you used for the initial lab and just paste it into these cells, it should automatically paste in correctly. So you should just go copy and paste that from the lab data that you already recorded. Okay, so now that I've inserted my data into the spreadsheet, it's in there. Now I'm just going to insert the line chart next to the data. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to select the data that I want to graph. Okay, so I want to graph this. Even though this is the only thing in here, the spreadsheet doesn't know that there could be thousands of other data points. So I just want to click how much I want. And one way to do that is to click and hold, go all the way down to the bottom, kind of get to the bottom of this and push down, and you can still go. Or you can click in the top square, scroll to the bottom, hold shift, and then it will select everything from the top to the bottom. Keep holding shift and let go, and click that part over there. So now I've kind of just selected the entire little box there. So there's a couple of ways to do it, tricks. But I'm going to insert now, and I'm going to insert a chart. And it will actually automatically know exactly what to do, just because Google is really, it's pretty smart. So that's exactly the type of chart that I want. I want a line chart. It auto-selected it for me. If I click on this, I can see some other types of line charts or other charts I could make, just different ways of looking at the data. But I think it's pretty clear which one we want. That I don't want this one. So there's a lot of different types. I want this plain one that it gave me. So the first step to do is to label the vertical axis, temperature in Celsius. So that's actually already been done for me, but I want to double check that it's there, that it looks good, and to see how to get there, because the next step is to change the font. In just a moment, actually, I'm going to have to change the font. So if I click on any of these elements here, whether it's the title or the lines or the data itself, I get a whole bunch of new options on this side. So play around with that for a minute. I can even make the chart bigger or smaller. I can make it really tiny. So that's kind of one way to make this work for you, so that, you know, if you wanted to make the data do something that you thought was important for whatever experiment you're running, you can manipulate that. But just so that we can keep on going, I want to make sure that these are labeled, and they are. We already kind of set that up for you. And they really just get their data from up here. Because we put it in correctly the first time, it doesn't have to generate those axes titles, the y-axis here and the x-axis here. It doesn't have to work to generate those, or you don't have to put that in. So that's kind of nice. So now I'm going to label the title of the graph and change it to temperature change of heated water. So that's a better title than something versus something. Never a great title, just the y-axis versus the x-axis. That's a lazy title. That's not a good idea. So we're going to go ahead and change it. And the next thing it asked me to do is to center the chart title. To do this, now we're getting a little more complicated. I need to make sure I'm clicked on the chart title. It tells me I've got it. I could also change the other titles that I'm going to do that a change to, and I'll do that in a moment. There's the text that's in there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to center it. So you can see this part here called alignment. I'm going to click on that and click the center button. There it is. So now it's centered. Now I'm going to change the font of the chart title and of the horizontal and vertical axes. 8 and 9 you can kind of do at the same time. So because I'm already in the chart title, I'm going to go ahead and change the font size to 24. I'll make it a little bigger, and the font to this one called wide. It's a little cleaner. And then I'm going to go ahead and change to the vertical axis. Now that's this one right here. It says temperature. Oh, there it is, temperature C. I'm going to make that 14 and wide. And I'll do the same for this one. I can either click on it and it'll change, or I can go through the little toggle and get to it that way. Okay. Now here's a tricky part. Actually, it's not very tricky, but you just have to make sure you click the right thing. Add data points to the line graph to make them 4-point size. So I'm going to click the graph. Really make sure you laser on and grab that data. So click it. Sometimes you got to click it a few times to really get it to pop up, but there it is under series. All these options, whether you click on them here or not, you can find them on the side of where it says customize here. Setup and customize, and you can find them in there, but sometimes it's easier to just click them. So I'm going to go to this part where it says point size, and I'm going to make them 7 points. Actually, I realize it says 4 points. I'm going to, after I make this video, update that so it says 7, not 4, because that was a typo. Okay, and now they're circles. You could even make them stars if you want. Just make sure I can see them. But there's lots of different ways to do that. The point is to make it stick out. And the point for doing that is so that you know that the data has been collected. If you just put, a line there, it could mean a lot of different things to a scientist. If you put points there, it means that every point was measured. And that's important for a scientist to know that every single point was somebody actually writing down a number. And that's what that indicates. If you don't put the points in there, if you say none, it kind of tells somebody those really weren't measured points, they're just guesses. Okay. Next, we're going to set the vertical axis maximum value to 120. Here's what that means. Let's go ahead and click on the vertical axis. Let's actually do it from here this time. There it is, vertical axis. If I scroll down, what I'm talking about is this part here. And the reason I'd want to change my maximum, take a look at it. My data goes up and then it hits its head on the roof kind of. I can't really see the data up there. And scientists want to see all the data, kind of like if you take your phone and you zoom out a bit, like pinch zoom, you want to try to see everything within the window and then some. So a good practice is to make that, they call it headroom for a graph, make the headroom a little larger. So down here, vertical axis, max, we're going to set it to 120. And there it is. Now I've got headroom, and it's easier to see what the graph is doing. Cool. Now we're going to resize the graph so the title fits on one line. Oh, for me, I didn't have to do that, but if your graph was small, you might have had to pull it out, depending on what screen size you have. I have a pretty big monitor here, so I do okay on that. And then the final kind of fun one is to change the color of the line. Again, I have to kind of click this a few times sometimes. Double click, got it back open, there we go. If you lose it, another way to get back in there, if you're like, I can't get back to the edit options, there are these three dots on the side. And if you click that and click edit chart, it will open up those options for you again. So back to, well, let's see if we can do it from here. It was under series, color. Remember, the other way to get there, you could just click on the data, double click, and it would have pulled it up too. Okay. That's it. Hope that was fun.